There was something artificial in the way she walked through the front door that night. Not fake like an act, but too perfect. The kind of perfect that doesn't grow from love or peace, it's the kind that's manufactured. Like a show being put on just for one person. She set down her purse gently, too gently, like it was a prop in a scene. No kiss. No hug. Just a deep breath and a slow stretch like she'd returned from some peaceful retreat, not a Sunday in the city. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a casual edge that scraped across my nerves. You wouldn't believe how booked they were. Took forever to get a spot. I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her at first. Because I already knew. I'd known for 2 days. 48 hours of pacing, pretending, and swallowing the urge to scream. That morning, she'd left with a white robe in a bag and a lie in her throat. Said she was headed for a luxury spa downtown, something her coworker recommended. What she didn't know was that I had already tracked the address she sent to my phone. It was a parking lot behind a bar I knew all too well. Not exactly where you go for hot stones and cucumber water. And still, I waited. Waited to see what she'd do when the mask slipped. Waited to see if she'd crack on her own. But instead, she came home glowing from her spa day, dripping in perfume and arrogance. That was the word for it, arrogance. She walked like someone who thought the universe would never dare touch her, like consequences were things that happened to other people. I stood in the kitchen, next to the table, where everything was laid out in silence. My phone, her phone, printed screenshots, the receipt from the gas station near that bar. And a photo, one she never thought I'd see. She was sitting across from him, laughing too hard, leaning in too close. He was touching her wrist, her wedding ring hand. She stepped into the room, still grinning like the day was hers, then stopped cold when she saw the table. Her pupils snapped to the photo, then the texts, then me. And in that second, she didn't gasp. She didn't cry. Her knees buckled. Not because she felt guilt, no, but because the game was over. I didn't speak. I let the silence pull the truth out of her mouth. I watched her try to rebuild the facade in real time, trying to pick which lie to wear. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. Seriously? She said, waving toward the photo like it was a joke. You're doing this? What, are you tracking me now? Still no apology. No denial. She went straight to offense, as if the real crime was me catching her, not what she'd done. That's when I knew, really knew, this wasn't an accident. It wasn't some lost emotional moment or whatever excuse people tell themselves to survive betrayal. This was calculated, cold. She leaned against the counter, like I was boring her. You want a confession or something? Fine. I had lunch. With someone. Big deal. I nodded. At 9:30 p.m.? She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Don't act like you've been perfect. I stepped closer. Just one step. Not threatening. Just close enough to look her directly in the face. His name is Tyler. You met him 6 weeks ago at that conference in Denver. He messaged me by accident 2 nights ago because he saved my number under your name. Her face didn't change. That was the worst part. Nothing. Not shame. Not fear. Just calculation. Like she was checking her options, her exits, her new lies. Like I was a client she had to outwit in a meeting. You're insane, she whispered, low, like it was the last weapon she had. But I'd already decided. That night wasn't for screaming. That night was for showing her I knew everything. And watching her fall apart, piece by carefully guarded piece. This was only the beginning. She didn't ask how I knew his name. She didn't ask how I got the messages. That told me everything. Because innocent people ask questions. Guilty ones start calculating timelines. She tried walking past me. Just brushed by like we weren't standing in the middle of a revelation. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. There's something you should know, I said calmly, almost softly. Tyler didn't just text me. He called me. That stopped her. Mid-step. No dramatic gasp, no dramatic turn, just a pause. Like a computer buffering. Then she slowly turned around and tilted her head, squinting at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You're lying. It wasn't a scream. It was a gamble. A desperate bluff thrown into the silence, hoping I'd blink first. He thought I was you, I continued. Said he couldn't wait for next weekend. Said he couldn't stop thinking about last time. Wanted to hear your voice before bed. Sounded real sweet, actually. Like a lovesick teenager. A little dumb, but honest. She laughed again, but this time it cracked halfway through. You're making this up. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, scrolled, and pressed play. Tyler's voice filled the room. Hey, babe. I know it's dumb, but I just wanted to hear you. Can't believe you wore that dress just for me. Don't tell your husband you left it in my car. I've been carrying it around like a lunatic. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes scanned the floor like the truth might be hiding in the floorboards. Her hands twitched, like she didn't know whether to fight or fold. You recorded him? No, I said. He left a voicemail. To your number. He thought it was yours. Turns out, he's not great at contact names. The room went still. Not silent, still. Like time itself hesitated. I saw her jaw shift slightly. Her fingers tighten around her phone. Her brain was sprinting. She wanted to say something. Anything. But everything she could have said was already too late. So she defaulted to what she always fell back on. Control. Fine, she said. Her voice suddenly cool, rehearsed. You want to make this into some kind of trial, go ahead. But let's not pretend you're some perfect husband. There it was again. The pivot. She still thought there was a way out through blame. Did I say I was perfect? I asked. Because this isn't about perfect. This is about you making me feel like I was crazy for weeks while you lied every single day. I didn't. You did. I snapped. First crack in my voice all night. You lied while you sat next to me on the couch. Lied while we planned our trip in May. Lied when you kissed me goodnight. Every day. And you didn't even have the decency to be careful about it. I was careful, she said, before realizing what she'd just admitted. And that's when I saw it. The truth wasn't the thing that broke her. It was realizing she'd lost the upper hand. That she'd made one stupid mistake. One slip-up. Tyler texting me instead of her. It didn't matter how many nights she snuck around. Or how many excuses she crafted. One dumb man with a soft heart and poor phone etiquette ended her whole circus. She dropped her purse. Let it fall flat on the hardwood. Her hands were shaking now. You ruined this, she whispered. You didn't have to go through my messages. You didn't have to play detective. I took a slow breath. I didn't ruin anything. I just found the bones you buried. That's when she finally did something new. She cried. Not a lot. No sobbing. Just one slow tear that she wiped away fast like it didn't count. And yet, I didn't feel victorious. No satisfaction. Just cold clarity. Like waking up after a long fever. I thought I knew the worst part already. I didn't. That came next. When she finally told me what she'd been hiding even deeper. Something Tyler didn't mention. Something that made everything else feel like an appetizer. She stood there, arms folded, back straight like she was trying to hold herself up with pure stubbornness. Her eyes were sharp now, not teary, not regretful, just hard. Like stone. I wasn't going to tell you, she said. No build-up. No drama. Just like that. There was no reason to. I was going to end it before it got messy. Before it got messy. That phrase stuck in my brain like a splinter under the skin. I repeated it in my head 3 times before I answered. You think this is not messy right now? She shook her head. No, this is messy because you made it messy. And just like that, she turned it on me again, a reflex at this point. I think in her head, the whole thing still wasn't real. She thought if she said the right words, if she controlled her tone just right, she could make it all bounce off. Like none of it could touch her unless she allowed it. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting. And then she broke. Not in the way I expected, not yelling, not falling apart, but by sitting down slowly at the edge of the couch and saying something so out of left field, it changed the entire trajectory of that night. He told me he loved me. I froze. Not because it hurt. No, it wasn't pain that hit me first. It was confusion. Because the way she said it wasn't romantic. It wasn't full of guilt or shame. She said it like it was a problem, an inconvenience. I didn't say it back, she added, almost defensively. I never promised him anything. I didn't even know what question to ask next. My brain was clawing at meaning, trying to understand why this was the detail she dropped now. I didn't want him to fall for me, she said. It was supposed to be light. I just needed to feel something again. There it was. The justification. The phrase that burned a hole straight through my chest. Because you don't say that unless you've already decided you're the victim. And I realized, sitting there across from the woman I thought I'd build a future with, that she wasn't sorry she'd betrayed me. She was sorry she lost control of her side project. I didn't cheat to hurt you, she said quietly, like that made it better. I just felt like I was disappearing. Like I was living the same day over and over again. You never noticed when I changed my hair. You never asked how my day was. Tyler made me feel alive. I interrupted. My voice came out low and unfamiliar. Is that what you're going to say? She blinked, paused, then said nothing. That silence was the answer. You could have told me you were unhappy, I said. You could have told me anything. You didn't even give me the chance to fix it. She looked at me like I'd missed the point. I didn't want you to fix it. That's the part you don't get. That moment, that was when something inside me tilted. Like a door closing. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I didn't recognize the person sitting on our couch anymore. Not just because of what she did, because of what she meant by it. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a weak moment. It was a decision. Repeated. Cold. Clean. And Tyler? He was just the spark she used to light her little bonfire. And now it was spreading. Do you love him? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. Maybe I could. But I probably won't. The most terrifying part of that sentence was how calm she was. Like she'd already played out every possible outcome and decided none of them were worse than staying here, with me. I nodded, took a step back. My body felt distant, mechanical. And then I said something I hadn't planned on saying that night. I want you to leave. Tonight. She blinked like I'd just spoken another language. What? You heard me. Pack a bag. Call whoever you need to. But you're not sleeping here tonight. Are you serious? She said, standing now, arms wide like she was the wronged one. You're kicking me out of my own house over this? This isn't your house anymore, I said. It's where you practiced your performance. I don't want it polluted by the person you've been pretending to be. She laughed. Sharp. Bitter. You think this makes you strong? Throwing me out like you're some hero. No, I said. This makes me free. And with that, I turned my back to her for the first time that night. I didn't slam the door. Didn't scream. I just walked away and waited to hear the sound of the suitcase she never planned to pack being zipped up in silence. She was gone in under 15 minutes. But she didn't go to Tyler. Not that night. That came later. The house was louder without her in it. Not because of noise, but because of absence. Like the silence was finally allowed to stretch out and scream after being compressed for so long. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't try. I just sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, staring at my phone. Not at the messages. I'd memorized those already. I was staring at her contact name, wondering how a name can stay the same while everything behind it rots. At 2:43 a.m. she texted me, I'll come by tomorrow to get the rest of my things. Just leave the key under the mat. No, I'm sorry. No, can we talk? Just logistics. Like we were colleagues closing a business deal. Cold. Efficient. Sanitized. But the thing about trying to make betrayal clean is that it never stays that way. Especially when other people start getting involved. At 9:06 the next morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. I was holding coffee I didn't plan to drink and trying to remember if I'd eaten anything since Friday. The phone rang again. I answered. Is this Kyle? His voice was cautious. Awkward. Young. Yeah. Who is this? It's, my name's Tyler. I stood up. Didn't even feel it, just found myself standing, my entire body tight with heat. He kept talking. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I didn't call to explain or defend anything. I just thought you should know she lied to me too. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I thought she was leaving you. I thought she already had. She told me you were separated, that you were living apart and just finalizing stuff. She said she stayed at the house sometimes to pick up mail or feed the dog. We don't have a dog, I said flatly. He paused. Right? Okay. I figured. There was something pathetic in his voice and I wanted to hate him for it. I really did. But what I felt instead was worse, a shared humiliation. We were both spinning in the same lie, just on opposite ends of it. She told me she was done with you. That she was just staying for appearances while she worked out her own place, he said. If I'd known the truth, you wouldn't have cared, I snapped. No, I would've, he said quickly. I'm not trying to make myself the good guy here. I feel stupid. And used. There was a long silence. And then he said it. She's with someone else now. That landed like ice water. What? Yeah, last night. After you told her to leave. She didn't come to me. She went to some guy named Marcus. I don't know who he is. She said it's just a friend. But I'm not dumb. I asked her straight up and she just laughed. Said I was being dramatic. She told me I was never supposed to be permanent anyway. That sentence. Never supposed to be permanent. I sat down. She'd moved to a third man. In less than 24 hours of leaving our house. Not because she loved him. Not because she had some new great escape plan. But because she needed someone. Anyone. Place to land. A mirror to keep her reflection alive. I didn't respond. I think Tyler heard the silence. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know it doesn't mean much. But I am. I believe you, I said. Not because I forgave him. But because I could hear it in his voice, he was just another idiot who believed her when she smiled and spoke softly. Same as me. Only difference was time. He hung up without asking anything from me. No closure. No redemption. Just silence. I stayed at the table for a long time after that, letting the reality expand in my mind. She wasn't cheating on me with Tyler. She was cheating on both of us and neither of us had the whole picture. Not even close. So I started digging. I went through old statements, old emails, looked at travel receipts. Not because I wanted to hurt myself, I was way past that. I needed the truth, the real timeline, the full blueprint of the house she'd built out of lies. And that's when I found something that didn't belong. An Airbnb receipt. Chicago. 4 months ago. She said it was a company retreat. Said she'd be back Sunday morning. She didn't come home until Monday night. I never questioned it. The booking was for 2 guests. Different name on the reservation. Marcus Caldwell. And just like that, everything reassembled. Tyler wasn't the beginning. He was the middle. Marcus was first. And she'd already replaced them both. This wasn't a fall from grace. This was a pattern. And I was just the long-term investment she used to fund her freedom. Marcus lived exactly 8 miles from my house. I know that because I typed his name into a search bar, found his dumb face on LinkedIn, and cross-referenced it with the Airbnb receipt buried in her archived Gmail folder. The one she forgot to delete because she probably assumed I'd never go looking. I used to think digging into someone's personal stuff was the lowest you could go in a relationship. Now I understand. The lowest you can go is sitting across from someone you've loved for a decade and realizing they never once saw you as real. Marcus Caldwell, 37. Real estate agent. Big smile. Cheap suits. One of those guys who's always tagged in other people's posts but never says anything himself. The kind of man who looks like he says let's circle back on that in casual conversation. I drove to his office on Wednesday afternoon. Didn't plan it. Didn't even shower first. I was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and that kind of stillness that lives just past rage. You know the one when everything gets quiet, not because you're calm, but because you're done. His office was in one of those sleek, soulless buildings with too much glass and not enough parking. I walked in like I had an appointment. Nobody questioned me. He was at his desk. Alone. He looked up. Smiled. That same LinkedIn smile. Hey, how can I help you? He asked, standing hand outstretched. I didn't shake it. You know who I am? He blinked. tilted his head like he was trying to solve a puzzle. No, I'm Jenna's husband. The smile died instantly. Not out of guilt, but because he realized this wasn't going to be a conversation he could charm his way out of. Oh, he said, sat back down slowly. Okay, so what do you want? I want to know how long it went on. He sighed, looked away. Listen, man, I didn't know she was still, don't lie, I cut in. You booked an Airbnb with her. You used your real name. That wasn't a mistake. You knew. He swallowed. Hard. Then leaned forward, elbows on the desk like this was a negotiation. All right. Fine. A little over a year. A year. My mind split into two timelines. One where I was driving us to her parents' house last Christmas, thinking about proposing a second honeymoon. And another where she was on her phone, texting him under the table, smiling at his emojis while I was sitting next to her in the same damn room. Did you love her? I asked. The question came out before I even meant it to. He shook his head. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He hesitated, then said it flatly. She said she needed freedom. Said you were too predictable. Too safe. I was just something different. Something different. He said it like he was proud. Like he was the experience she treated herself to after a long year of being bored. She told me she'd leave you eventually, he added. But she always said she needed the right timing. I guess that never came. No, I said. Because you weren't the ending. He squinted. What? She left my house Sunday night. You know where she went? He stared. Not to you, I continued. Not to Tyler either. She went to someone else. Someone new. And that's when I saw it, the first real emotion cross his face. It wasn't anger. Wasn't shame. It was recognition. He already knew. He knew she'd done it to him too. He leaned back, rubbed his eyes. Yeah, he muttered. She called me last week. Said it was over. I thought it was about you. Turns out she just upgraded. He nodded. Said nothing for a long time. And then he looked at me, really looked. You know what's crazy? I don't even blame her. That stopped me cold. You, what? I mean, I should. But she has this way. Like when she talks to you, it's like no one else exists. Like you're the one she's been waiting for. And you believe it. Every word. He looked haunted. Like he was still waking up from a spell he wasn't even aware he was under. She made me feel like I was better than I was, he said quietly. Like I was chosen. I let that sit between us for a second. Then I said she made me feel the same way. And in that moment, I saw it clear as day, she didn't fall in love with Marcus. Or Tyler. Or whoever came next. She didn't need to love them. She needed them to reflect back whatever image she wanted to project that week. They were mirrors. Temporary stages. Emotional props. And I'd been the longest running one. She's not going to stop, I said, standing. He looked up. No. She's not. So what do we do? He smiled sadly. You move on. You heal. And you pray she never circles back. I left without another word. Walked past the receptionist, through the glass doors, and out into the wind. I didn't feel closure. I didn't feel peace. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel confused. She wasn't some tragic soul who made a mistake. She was a collector. Of attention. Of affection. Of control. And every man who stepped into her orbit? Just another name on a growing list she'd forget the second the shine wore off. But I wasn't done yet. Because I still had something of hers she didn't even know she left behind. 3 days passed. She hadn't called. Not once. No knocks on the door. No missed texts. Just that one cold message, leave the key under the mat. She thought she was ending things on her terms. Like this was just another clean break in her little personal anthology of exits. One she'd forget by next season. Like I was chapter 3 in a book she never intended to finish reading. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that she'd left something behind. And not something she could just replace. It was a notebook. A small, spiral-bound leather one. Not flashy. Not hidden. Just forgotten. Stuffed in the back of her dresser drawer behind a stack of old scarves. I don't know what made me pull it out. Maybe I was looking for some kind of final proof. Maybe I was hoping it'd be blank. It wasn't. The first page had a date. 2 years ago. And underneath it a list. Names. Some were familiar. Most weren't. All men. Each entry was dated. Each name had a short line underneath it like she was giving Yelp reviews to people's hearts. Some were brutally honest. Others were haunting. Eli, too soft. Didn't push back. Couldn't keep up with me. Chris, obsessed. Had to block him. Kept saying I changed his life. Marcus, exciting at first, got clingy. Lied to him about having a kid. He cried. That was awkward. Tyler, perfect timing. Dumb but sweet. Probably thinks we'll end up together. Kyle married him because he felt like a foundation. Useful. Good cover. Not exciting but loyal. Safe. I read that last one 4 times. Useful. Good cover. Safe. I wasn't her partner. I was a structure she built her chaos around. A silent investor in a life she was using to fund her little side worlds. Took everything in me not to tear the pages out. Burn the whole thing. Pretend I'd never seen it. But I didn't. Because this wasn't just closure. It was leverage. And I knew exactly what to do with it. So I made a copy. Not digital, physical. Photocopied every page at a FedEx down the road. Slid it into a clean envelope. No note. No name. Just the evidence. Then I went to her office. She wasn't there. Her assistant recognized me immediately. But before she could say anything, I just handed her the envelope and said, "Give this to her. Directly. No one else." She nodded, confused. I walked out. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I let it ring. Then again. Same number. I answered. "You've lost your mind," she snapped before I could say anything. "You went through my private things? You photocopied my personal writing? What kind of psycho did you read what you wrote about me?" I said. She fell silent. I could hear her breathing hard through the phone. "I didn't send it to anyone else." "Not yet," I continued. "You're threatening me now?" "I'm giving you a warning," I said. "Because if you think I'm going to let you rewrite the story, paint me as the cold husband, the boring one, the one who didn't see you, think again. You don't get to control how people see me," she hissed. "Neither do you. Not anymore." I waited. Let the silence stretch. "You're pathetic," she finally said. "No," I replied. I was patient. And that was the last thing I ever said to her. I blocked her number the second we hung up. Changed the locks. Sent her a lawyer's letter the next morning about dividing the house. No back and forth. No meetings. Everything through lawyers now. Cold and clinical, just how she liked it. But here's what she didn't expect. The notebook wasn't the only thing she left behind. There was a second one. Older. And this one? Had more than just names. It had plans. Real ones. Names of coworkers. Stories she was preparing to spin. Things she'd told different people in case, like a politician managing 5 different versions of the truth just in case one blew up. I read every word. The second notebook was older, years older. The pages were thinner, more worn, like it had been carried through more of her life than the other one. It was filled with different ink colors, different handwritings, her handwriting, but altered. Like she'd written entries for different audiences, different voices. Some neat. Some sloppy. Some written sideways in the margins. She didn't just lie. She rehearsed. Inside were pages of rehearsals, what to say if someone found out about Tyler, how to spin Marcus into a manipulative ex who wouldn't let go, excuses for late nights, pre-typed breakup emails she never sent. There were even timelines where I was the villain. Versions of our marriage where I was cruel, dismissive, emotionally unavailable, things she could drop into conversation later like breadcrumbs, so when the truth eventually cracked through, she could say, "See? I told you he wasn't what he seemed." She'd built an entire fallback world. In writing. She was preparing for the future not to go her way. And I wasn't going to let her use that against me. So I did something most men in my situation wouldn't have thought to do. I made an appointment with her boss. I showed up not angry. Not unhinged. Calm. Professional. I had a folder in my hands, nothing more. Her boss, Lauren, looked surprised to see me, but she knew who I was. She'd been to our wedding. Gave us a weird but expensive blender. I returned the next day. We sat down in a glass office, just the two of us. "I'm not here to start drama," I told her, placing the folder on the desk. "But I think you deserve to know what's been happening under your nose." She opened the folder. Inside, copies of the second notebook's pages. Carefully chosen ones. The ones that detailed how Jenna lied about sick days, fabricated client meetings, and manipulated coworkers to cover for her while she was out on business trips with Marcus, some of which the company reimbursed. Lauren read in silence. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She just turned each page like she'd been suspecting something for a long time and was finally getting confirmation. "Where did you get these?" she asked, cold. She left them behind. She didn't think she had to clean up after herself. She assumed she'd be the one telling the story. Lauren didn't ask another question. She didn't need to. I stood to leave. She didn't stop me. She didn't thank me either. Didn't matter. I wasn't looking for her to get fired. I was looking to cut off the narrative before it could spread, before she could crawl into people's ears and plant stories about the poor wife who suffered in silence and finally broke. That's what she always did. She didn't destroy people directly. She made them look like villains so no one cared when they collapsed. But this time, no more collapsing. By Friday, her name was removed from the company's team page. By Monday, I got a text from a mutual friend, someone who hadn't spoken to me in weeks. "Hey, just wanted to say, I didn't know the half of it. She told us you cheated, that you got violent. I feel sick." And then another, "We're all hearing different stories now. Nothing lines up. She's freaking out." I didn't respond to either, because I didn't need to win. I didn't need to post receipts online or burn her name in public. I just needed to take the matchbook out of her hand before she burned everything else down. And now, she was out of stories. Her silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. But I wasn't done yet, because there was one more person I had to face. One I'd been avoiding since all of this started. Not her. There's a strange kind of noise that lives inside you when you go through something like this. It's not screaming. It's not sobbing. It's not even anger. It's more like static. A low, relentless hum in the back of your mind that never quite fades, even when the world goes quiet. It's the noise of your life shifting under your feet, the echo of a future that no longer exists. I'd been running on tasks. Revenge. Survival. Control. But now that all of that was done, the notebooks delivered, the stories stopped before they spread, the locks changed, the house half empty, I was left with just me. And that was the part one hadn't prepared for. The house looked bigger now. Not because she'd taken much she hadn't, but because the presence she carried was always larger than her body. She filled rooms with noise, smell, heat. Her routines ran deep in the bones of this place. I couldn't open the fridge without seeing the coconut milk she used for her smoothies. Couldn't sit on the couch without hearing her laugh layered over reruns of shows she never finished. That night, I did something I hadn't done since before we were married. I sat down in the backyard. Alone. No phone. No plans. Just the dark sky and the faint hum of streetlights and sprinklers. And I started writing. Not because I wanted to document it. Not because I had some grand letter to send. I just wanted to remember who I was before she taught me how to question everything. It started small. Lists. Things I used to enjoy. Places I wanted to visit. Music I hadn't listened to in years because she thought it was too moody. Then it shifted. Questions. Real ones. Why didn't I see it earlier? Why did I let her make me feel small? Why did I believe her smile more than my own instincts? What did I actually love about her and what was I just afraid to lose? That one hit hard. Because when I was honest with myself, really honest, I hadn't loved her in a long time. I'd loved the image of her. The way she lit up a room, how people leaned in when she spoke. I'd loved being beside her at events, watching her command attention, feeling like I was part of something electric. But love? Real love? That died quietly. Probably sometime between the third lie I forgave and the 50th night she came home late smelling like stories that didn't fit. She didn't break me with the betrayal. She broke me with the boredom of it. The pattern. The sheer predictability of her chaos wrapped in fresh packaging every few months. She thought she was this untamable storm. But in truth, she was a rerun I watched for too long, hoping the ending would change. And now, sitting under that wide sky, I felt something I hadn't felt since the beginning, relief. Not just that she was gone. Relief that I didn't have to keep pretending anymore. Pretending to be understanding. Pretending I didn't notice the distance. Pretending love could grow in soil this shallow. She'd always said I was safe. Like it was a weakness. Like it was something dull and easily replaced. But safe people don't lie in notebooks. Safe people don't rewrite history. Safe people don't build their lives like escape rooms. And suddenly, I wasn't ashamed of who I was anymore. I was proud. Because I stayed when she pulled away. I tried when she played games. I believed when it would have been easier to give up. That isn't weakness. That's strength with a quiet voice. By the time the sun rose, I had filled 8 pages with everything I remembered about myself. Some of it silly, some of it painful, all of it real. It started with a delivery. A misdelivered package, actually cardboard box, medium-sized, wrong name, wrong street number by 2 digits. I only noticed because I was walking back from the mailbox and saw it sitting on my porch. The label said Hannah S. I'd never heard the name before. I almost left it there, honestly. Wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone. But something about the handwriting on the box caught me. It was done in pen, not printed, and on the side, in slanted loops, it read, "Please don't bend." It's full of memories. Curiosity wins when you've got nowhere else to be. So I Googled the address. For houses down. Other side of the street. I carried it over barefoot. Knocked once. She answered the door in paint-streaked clothes, earbuds dangling from her neck. She looked surprised, but not in the awkward, social panic way. Calm. Curious. "Hey," I said. "Wrong delivery." She smiled. Wide and immediate. Not flirty. Not forced. Just easy. "Oh, thank God. I've been waiting on that for a week." Thought it disappeared into the void. Memory void, apparently. She laughed. "That tracks. Thank you." I handed it off, nodded, turned to go, and she said, "Wait. Do you want coffee?" As thanks. And just like that, there it was. A choice. I paused. Something in my chest hesitated. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I realized this would be the first human conversation I'd have without her in the back of my head. I said yes. The kitchen was small, warm, full of mismatched mugs and a cat that clearly didn't respect personal space. Hannah moved like someone who spent a lot of time alone but wasn't lonely. Everything she touched had a story behind it. The photo taped to the fridge. The chipped mug she insisted was the only one that makes coffee taste right. A paint-splattered sketchbook on the table that looked like it hadn't been closed in days. We talked. Nothing deep, nothing sharp, no traumas laid bare or tragic backstories swapped. She didn't ask what I did for work. She didn't talk about exes. We talked about movies we lied about seeing, what cities smell like in different seasons, whether cereal counts as soup. Stupid stuff. Safe stuff. And then, just as I was leaving, I said something I hadn't planned on saying. I wrote something. It's dumb. Just personal stuff. A list, really? Trying to remember who I am. She tilted her head. That's not dumb. I don't usually show people things like that. So don't show me, she said. Unless you want to. I looked at her, really looked. There was no angle. No expectation behind her eyes. Just presence. I'll bring it by sometime, I said. And the next day I did. I left the pages in her mailbox. Folded in a plain envelope. No note. Just me on paper. The raw version. No editing. She didn't text. Didn't call. But 2 days later, I found a folded sheet slipped under my doormat. It was a response. Not a love letter. Not a breakdown of what I'd written. Just a note. You're not just rebuilding. You're resurfacing. That's harder. And more honest. Most people skip that part. Keep writing. There were no hearts. No numbers. Just that. And suddenly I realized it wasn't about Hannah. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It was about finally speaking out loud in a world where I'd spent years being silent next to someone who only ever heard herself. Hannah wasn't a replacement. She was a witness to the version of me that Jenna never cared to meet. But what mattered more than being seen was what I saw in myself now. Peace doesn't arrive like a movie scene. There's no sunrise montage. No slow, inspirational music in the background. No sudden moment where everything makes sense. It's quieter than that. Slower. You don't even know it's happening at first. You just stop waking up in panic. You stop checking your phone for names you no longer care to see. You stop rehearsing the argument in your head that you'll never have, because the need to win has finally dissolved. Took me months to get there. Not in a straight line. Grief comes in loops, not steps. But one morning, I woke up, made breakfast, and realized I didn't think about her once. That was the day I knew I was free. Not just from her. From the version of myself I became around her. The man always apologizing, always second-guessing, always shrinking to fit the shape of someone else's ego. That man is gone now. Not because I buried him, but because I listened to him for the first time. Gave him the pen. Let him write his way out. I didn't run back to Hannah. I didn't need to. We still talk. Sometimes in long coffee chats, sometimes just in passing waves on the sidewalk. She's not a prize. Not a reward for my suffering. She's proof that connection doesn't always come with conditions. She asked nothing of me. Never tried to rewrite me. She just said, keep writing. So I did. The house looks different now. I painted the walls. Switched out the furniture. Not because I needed to erase the past, but because I wanted to reclaim the space. The dining table I once stared across during lies and fake smiles? It's gone. Donated. Replaced with a simple oak one I built myself, piece by piece, over a long weekend. Imperfect. Solid. Mine. I found the last item she left behind last week. A small bracelet, gold, twisted, stuffed in the back of a drawer I never opened. For a moment I just held it. Turned it over. It had no weight. No value. Just a relic from a story that's no longer mine. I dropped it in a donation box without a word. Because that's what you do with things that no longer serve you. You let them go. The betrayal used to define me. I wore it like a scar, angry, loud, fresh. But not anymore. Now it's just a story I lived through. One that taught me how to see people clearly. How to trust myself. How to walk away before I get burned twice. If you're reading this and you're where I was months ago, staring down the collapse of something you once believed in, I'll say this: you will not get closure from the one who broke you. But you will find it in your own reflection when you finally stop asking why they hurt you and start asking why you stayed silent for so long. I'm not angry anymore. I'm awake. And that, I've learned, is the real ending. Not revenge. Not justice. Just freedom. And peace. Hard-earned. Quiet. Mine.